Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another exciting Sitara seminar. Today we have with us Dr. Sangeeta Kohli. She is a professor of mechanical engineering at IIT Delhi. She is also associate dean in the student welfare at IIT Delhi. She has been actively involved with rural technology for many years. She teaches a very interesting course named Human Values and Technology at IIT Delhi, which I believe is very relevant, especially for Sitara students. This talk will explore whether we work on high-end technology for applications like space, nuclear, etc., or develop technologies suitable for rural applications. Commonality being that both of these need a strong understanding of the fundamentals of the success. I heartily welcome Dr. Kohli on behalf of Sitara. I urge you to kindly start the talk. Thank you.
Thank you. I must thank Mr. Edi Rao for inviting me for this talk. I was actually not prepared, and the time was very short for me to prepare a talk. Hence I checked with him whether I can use one of my old talks. So I'll be very open about it. I'm using one of the old talks, but anyway, the work that we do does not change overnight, and hence we always make incremental changes in our talks. Can you all hear me at the back? So this is the talk which I prepared just about 2.5 years back. And at that time, it was a private college, they invited me to give a talk, and I was wondering what kind of talk will excite the students. Then I thought about this topic, back to the basics to march ahead. I don't know whether it excited the students or not, but it definitely excited me to think along these lines. How many of you have read the abstract to today's talk? Few of you. So I think when we say back to the basics to march ahead, what exactly I mean will become clear gradually. Those who have read the abstract may be able to appreciate it little earlier. So let me first tell you what made me really think along these lines. First of all, I must admit that I have been extremely fortunate to have been groomed by people who were not conventional in their thinking. And directly or indirectly, a large number of such people who have influenced me, and one of them is sitting right here, is Adate. In fact, in one sense, he is my teacher, even though I have never studied in IIT Bombay. I have never attended his classes. But he has been one of the role models that we look up to. So whatever I am going to talk about today, particularly before I talk about the technologies that we have developed, or that we are working on, the basic ideas, the basic philosophy with which we are moving ahead is basically coming from my mentors, the visionaries who thought along these lines maybe 30 to 40 years back, and gradually we started appreciating what it means to actually go against the stream. So with this, I would just like to start with the first question which always comes to our mind, that our society is so obsessed with the word progress. Wherever we go, whether we are in IITs or whether we are in villages, wherever we go, everybody wants to progress. And if I were to ask any of you, is there anybody here who does not want to progress? No hands will go up. But are we really clear what that progress really means. So for some reason I decided not to use the word progress, but to use the word advancement. So if you go to any corporate sector, more than the word progress, people want to say we want advanced technologies, we want advancement. But how many of us understand what we mean by advancement? So the key thing which I want to address in the first part of my talk is it possible for us to ask these fundamental questions? How many of us actually ask these questions? I understand that most of you sitting here are either associated with Sitara or the Institute of Design. So possibly you already have, at least the Sitara students must have gone through the courses on appropriate technology and related philosophical background. But how many of us who have not been through that exposure actually ask that question? How many of your friends ask this question? What do we really mean by that advancement? Is it any addition of new knowledge? Is that advancement? Or is just, if I just grow in size, is that advancement? Particularly with respect to IIT, when we say we need advanced technologies. So are we really talking about technologies with additional knowledge, with increase in knowledge frontiers, or what is it? And in which direction are we advancing? So whenever we advance, advancement is almost like a vector. You ought to decide the direction. So do we ever ask this question, that whatever direction have we chosen, does it take us towards a more desirable state of society? How many of us ask this question? And then for whom are we aiming for that advancement? And by whom? So when we say by whom, who brings about this new knowledge? We are all supposed to be contributors to that. So when we want to answer those questions, in the light of that, the first thing which automatically comes to our mind is, let's look back at the advancement so far. Can we make an assessment of these advancements? So no doubt that we have technology which is overpowering our society. We have newer products, and our younger generation doesn't need to be told about that. This list can be endless. It could just go on and on and on. Coming to the question of direction. So which direction of advancement have we taken so far? Let's understand. So if you look at the direction of advancement, can we say that it has basically increased the material prosperity? We all agree it has increased the material prosperity, but for whom? For those who can afford it. Right? If somebody can afford to buy a cell phone, he can buy that cell phone. If somebody can afford a car, yes, there is a material prosperity there. But somebody who cannot afford the car has no meaning with respect to as far as prosperity in his or her life goes. If we look at the flip side of the direction of advancement that we have taken, we can see this. So it's actually not very difficult to see if we were to do a deeper analysis of how things have happened in the past, several decades, in fact, ever since the Industrial Revolution started. We have moved essentially very consciously towards material prosperity. And the moment we move towards prosperity, material prosperity, that is our direction, then automatically there is dominance of consumerism. This is something that you cannot avoid. It's the other side of the same coin. There is automatically a greater focus on what belongs to me, what is mine. So the whole attachment to myself and my ego comes so closely with the whole concept of material prosperity. Because again, there are all different facets of the same reality. And let's ask this question. Why are we getting educated today? When a parent tells the child that you must go to school, you must get educated, what reason is being given for somebody to get educated? How many of you are getting educated because you want joy out of the increase in knowledge? How many of us? Let's go to a school and find out how many children are actually enjoying the process of learning. Unfortunately, in today's context, the number of people who will be identified with that will be abysmally. In fact, I still remember a parent-teacher meeting which I attended in my son's school when he was only in 5th standard. And at that time, some parents were talking about how to encourage a child to study. And one parent got up and said, my son wants to be a pilot. So I tell him, okay, if you want to be a pilot, you must study. Unless you get good marks, you cannot become a pilot. I must tell you that I was deeply saddened by that comment. Because the moment, so again, becoming a pilot is not something which is wrong. Yes, we all have aspirations. We want to attain something in life. But then, to link education solely with my individual aspirations is something which actually defeats the very purpose of education in my view. But unfortunately today, whenever we talk about education is for my prosperity. I want to come to IIT so that I can get an X figure salary, so that I can get a big package, so that I can have a comfortable life. So education is more for my own prosperity. It's for very select few. Education means more than that. And it's nice to say that many of you sitting over here would have come here essentially with that aspiration. That you want to go beyond your own prosperity. So in most of the situations, the key objective, my job is the package I get, which is something which in every class, whenever we have talked about it, irrespective of the cross-section of the class, majority will be answered. The package which is important, everything else is blessing. So when we see all these things, then the automatic result is the question which comes to our mind, that are we heading in the right direction? Is the advancement of the society in the right direction? It's very ironical in my view that in the same breath we talk about a 7-figure salary, these days even 8-figure salary, and at the same time we talk so passionately about sustainability. It's almost like a buzzword. That all of us want to march ahead for sustainability without understanding what the sustainability is. So let's ask ourselves this question. What is sustainability? From what I have understood so far, there are three absolute essentials of sustainability. Maybe there will be technical definitions of that, but what I am giving here is almost like a layman's understanding of sustainability. In my understanding, which I have gained from my teachers, a sustainable society must use its resources in a sustainable manner. So, hence dependence on renewable resources. It must not damage its environment or ecology beyond a delicate balance. The balance must be maintained. And on top of all this will be social equity. These days we talk of renewable resources, we talk of ecological balance, but how many of us actually talk about social equity? If we don't have social equity, no society can be stable, and an unstable society cannot be sustainable. It's as simple as that. There will always be strife, and something that we are witnessing more and more in whatever form, in the various forms, the entire world. So unless we understand this triangle of sustainability, we won't be able to appreciate that the kind of aspirations that we have in terms of individual prosperity actually goes against the very essence of sustainability. So if we are talking about the two at the same time, we are actually contradicting ourselves. We need to be very careful about that. For us to understand this whole issue of equity, resources and ecological imbalance, let's see what are some of the figures. Today, world's 50% population lives on less than $2.5 a day. It's a question of survival for them, their basic needs. And if we look at that cross-section, have the advancements really reached them? Unfortunately, for most of us who come to IIT, we hardly have an exposure to this cross-section of society. Unless we actually decide to talk to the maid who works at my home, or the rickshawala who is taking me from one place of the campus to the other, or maybe the guard who is outside my hostel, unless I actually talk to them, or maybe a child who is cleaning the table in the restaurant where I go frequently, unless I actually talk to them, I will never know what it means to be at that level. It's extremely important for us to explore their world, to be able to appreciate that section of the society and their needs. So when we say advancement, for whom and by whom? So for whom, the data tells us. But when we say by whom, why do I put this question? Most of us, when we graduate from IIT, what kind of jobs do we seek? The high paying jobs on one hand, and what do those jobs do? They are actually all strengthening the movement in the same direction, which is leading to more and more consumerism. You all agree to that? How many of us actually choose to do something different? A very, very small number. Fortunately, that number is not zero. So we still have hope. We still have hope on people like you here. So that is why when we are saying how many of us are joining the race and hence contributing to the advancement in the same direction. That's what majority of the people end up doing. So in that context, do we say that something has gone wrong? What has happened? Are we really in the right direction? So if you look at the whole triangle of sustainability, let's look at the idea of consumerism. And those of you who have read Schumacher attended the course on appropriate technology would be able to appreciate this. The moment I talk about unlimited growth on the planet, and unlimited growth is what every corporate sector wants to talk about. Everybody wants to say, oh, my growth is getting saturated. As a nation, we are so upset that our growth is getting saturated. We don't ask this question, is it possible to sustain an unlimited growth on a finite planet? And this is so beautifully put by Schumacher. So the moment we move towards consumerism, we will definitely increase resources beyond the replenishable potential of nature. We will definitely generate waste which is at a much higher rate than the society can, that the nature can replenish itself. So the lower two are absolutely clear, that more the consumerism, more the material prosperity that I focus on, more will be the deviation from sustainability in the lower part of the triangle. But what happens at the top? The moment I want a 7-figure salary, the moment I want all the resources for my prosperity in a finite room, if there are finite number of chairs, if there are more people than the number of chairs, it will always be musical chairs. Everybody cannot get a seat. And if there is a heap of resources lying here, those who already have enough, if they want to grab more, they are more powerful, they will grab more. It will have to be at the cost of somebody else. I cannot get 1 crore salary a month or even a year for that matter. Both are difficult for us to appreciate. I cannot get that kind of a salary without somebody else paying for it. It is actually really disturbing for me today that some of my, there is such a large number of my friend circle who are buying a JioSIM, Reliance JioSIM. And I just asked them, why did you buy another one? You already had 2 numbers. Oh, the data is free. So we are all so much after something coming free. And we forget that nothing can be free. If you are not paying for it, somebody else is paying for it. But we have no qualms about somebody else paying for it. And when the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, when they gave their report after which they got the Nobel Prize, they made some statements. That it's actually the poor of the world who are responsible for still keeping this earth livable. If it were for the rich, the earth would already be gone. So the more we are moving towards prosperity, the more we are damaging the earth, the more we are taking away things from the have-nots, the more they are aspiring to be like us, and the more is the strife, and the more is the iniquity. So next time you think of the kind of pay package that you want or your friends want, just remember this, that this is adding to the lack of sustainability on all the 3 counts of the triangle, taking us away from the sustainability. So if we are really serious about the idea of sustainability, it's important for us to start thinking about our personal goals. And it's important for us to start thinking about our basic needs. So go back to the basic questions of life once again. So when we look at this abysmal picture, then one wonders, is there a way out? There was a time when I used to be extremely pessimistic, as if there is no way out. But fortunately, I would say that my teachers, my mentors have kindled a hope, a ray of hope in me. And I know this much that, okay, if one is able to identify the direction in which one moves, the goal may be very far, but one should be satisfied that we are at least in the right direction. And in that context, I ask this question, is it possible for us to redefine advancement, redefine progress? So you can use the words advancement and progress. And this is what Sitara wants to do. And this is what I'm sure many friends in IDC also want you to start thinking about. So if we start marching along a path of sustainable options, only then can we even conceptualize the possibility of peace and prosperity. Otherwise, even theoretically it's not possible. So when we talk about the three aspects of sustainability, is it possible for us to now change the direction so that we move towards a sustainable direction? And when I come to the resource utilization part, I cannot talk only in terms of increasing efficiency and hence conserving resources. There is one study, I don't have the data here, but in some place in the West, they found that when the inefficient lighting was replaced by efficient lighting, actual energy production went up, energy consumption went up, actual electricity utilization went up. So it's not whether I am using inefficient bulbs or efficient bulbs. That's not sufficient. It's also important for me to know how many I am using. So I go to a shop, so once upon a time the shop will have 2-3 tube lights, fine. So in place of 2-3 tube lights, if you could have 2-3 efficient lighting, whatever is defined in terms of efficient lighting, because there also there are question marks. But for the same energy consumption, he can have much more light. So he can actually reduce the amount of energy consumed for an acceptable light. But what the shopkeeper actually does is, now he can afford more bulbs, so he will put 3 times more bulbs. And the actual consumption actually increases. So has the increase in efficiency increased our direction, changed our direction towards sustainability? No. So we are not asked a fundamental question, how much do I need? We are not asking that fundamental question. So only if I ask that, will I be able to benefit from the conservation, from that increase in efficiency of the gadgets that I use. That's why I write, when we talk about concerns for resource conservation, we need to ask the basic question, how much do I need? And then of course, we are always talking about optimization, which is hallmark of engineers. Then coming back to the other aspect of sustainability, the ecological and environmental issue. We are all the time trying to find only technological solutions. We may talk of carbon sequestration or blocking the sun rays using some fancy technology. We can think of any number of things. But I am absolutely clear, as I have understood, and I know that many people who think about this issue seriously understand that unless we relook at our lifestyle, we cannot reverse the environmental degradation. It's not possible. If we want to have more and more ACs, if we want to have more and more cars, We may use hydrogen as fuel. We may use some other sustainable fuel. We may use fuel cells. We may talk of all kinds of new technologies. But there will always be a flip side to that. And the more addicted we get to these things, the more damaging it is for ourselves also. And the more damaging it will be for the society. So there is no way we can actually look at only technological solutions to solve this problem. We have to start with ourselves first. Similarly, coming to social equity. So when we talk about social equity, that is where the context of Sitara becomes relevant. But does technology have a role here? Again, is it possible for us to go back to the basics of technology to see whether technology can actually help those who are at the margin of the society? To answer that question, whether technology can help, let's try to see why there is a social inequity. I'm sure many of you probably are already familiar with these ideas, but probably it helps to revisit them. So if you look at the source of living for most of us, we ought to work. So employment is a must for everybody. But as we want to develop more and more automation, what are we saying about employment? We want driverless cars. We want dishwashers so that we can do away with our maids. We want washing machines. We want anything and everything that can eliminate human labor. Almost every entrepreneur who is serious about his business wants to eliminate human intervention, wants to employ least number of people in his company, because people are nuisance. If people become a nuisance, then we have already sown the seeds of greater inequity. There is no way we can address this issue, and there is no way you may employ n number of so-called sustainable technologies, but society is going to collapse under the weight of this inequity. There is no way we can sustain it. In fact, if you look at the present situation, it's the unorganized sector in India which is accounting for more than 80% of the employment. In fact, KVIC, the Khadi and Village Industries Commission, is directly or indirectly helping a large number of these people. So this is what unorganized sector is doing. So this is much more than only 20% of employment comes from the organized sector. But who does the educated youth work for? How many of the educated youth work for the unorganized sector? Not even 2%. Forget about 20. Majority of us work for the organized sector, and hence, and the organized sector is working more for their own profit, their own growth. So how can we address the issue of inequity in this whole scenario? It's almost like a hopeless situation. So it becomes extremely important for people like you, who are the torch bearers of, taking the technology to the have-nots, to understand these issues at the fundamental. So when we are talking about technology, particularly technology that you and I work for, we must ask a fundamental question: who does this technology benefit? When I write an app and I am very excited about it, what is that app for? Who does it benefit? I know a large number of IITians being obsessed with having startups for supply of food with a click of button within the shortest possible period at 4 o'clock in the morning. So when I work for that startup, let's understand who is that startup benefiting? So I've already talked about this, and how many engineers are actually working for the upgradation of technologies in the unorganized sector. So actually it's an unfair competition between organized and unorganized sector. So we cannot reject the unorganized sector that they are primitive and hence they cannot compete against the organized. It's an unfair competition. Has the science and technology inputs gone into the unorganized sector? Everything has gone into the organized sector. The rich baby has gotten more and more inputs. So it's almost like a stepmotherly treatment being given to the unorganized sector by the whole society, and particularly by the educated class. And that is the reason why I chose this talk for addressing the people who are actually in your cabinet. So the whole idea that I wanted to raise or highlight in the first part of my talk was that whatever we do in the name of technology, is it possible for us to start asking some questions? If I work on a PhD problem, can I ask the question, why am I working on this problem? Who is it going to benefit? What for? When I want to look for a job, can I ask this question? Who is my company going to benefit? So who is going to get anything out of it? So unless we ask these questions, we are definitely contributing to the conventional direction of advancement, which in no uncertain term is going against sustainability. So many of you would already have an exposure to the state of some rural industries. So the second part of my talk, I just want to give you an exposure from whatever we have been working on to the kinds of problems that the rural sector can face. This is essentially for us to understand the technical challenge is actually much more in the unorganized sector than in the organized sector. There is absolutely no doubt about it. Now, many times people say when they go abroad, they say, oh, I want challenging problems. Industry in India doesn't offer challenging problems. But I would say that we have not looked where the challenge is. The challenge lies elsewhere. Now, there is a story which goes by several names. But there was somebody who was looking under the pole of light, searching for something. And somebody asked, what are you searching for? He said, oh, I have lost my key. I am searching for it here. Yes, but where did you lose it? Oh, I lost it somewhere in the dark. And why are you looking at here? That's because there is no light there. So rather than taking light to where there is darkness, we choose to come only to the light and spend all our time there, even though all our search is of no use there. So there are a couple of things which I want to share with you. You will see that the moment we start going to rural industries particularly. So the reason why I am talking about rural industries against the basic rural amenities is that at some stage some of us felt, I would say that my mentors felt that, and I also got influenced by that idea, that while we do need to provide basic amenities to the rural sector, equally important is to provide them employment opportunities. And hence rural industrialization becomes an extremely important mode of employment. We will see that whatever rural industries exist today, actually they use very primitive technologies, very poor in energy efficiency, there is excessive drudgery, there are unhealthy and uncomfortable working conditions, and undesirable situation in which they work. So let me just give you a few examples. These are pictures of two furnaces that we have visited. On the top you can see this is a furnace which is used for battery recycling. So lead acid batteries, I don't know how many of you are aware, are almost completely recycled. The acid is removed from them, that is taken to the chemical industry, and the rest of the battery, the plate and lead is reclaimed. So look at the kind of status these furnaces are in. At the bottom you can see the furnace which is used for making bell metal craft. I don't know how many of you have seen the dhokra work from Bastar and also from West Bengal. There are exquisite items that come from there. And if you go to any of the emporia, you will find there are things which sell several of thousands of rupees. But the conditions under which they make them, it's really very difficult to actually even stand there when they are doing it. You can see the whole place. It's open heart furnaces, very primitive, very polluting, very low efficiency, and the working conditions are so poor that they have to work in the middle of the night in summer, because daytime they cannot work. In fact, you can also see some of the jaggery industries, something that I put here. We had gone to a jaggery industry where they were making jaggery. So again a very primitive method followed. There we found a packet of the color that they were using to put in the jaggery. I don't think any of you will be able to read it, it's very small print. It writes poison non-edible. And this is what we found them using. When we asked them, what are you using? This is poison. नहीं, हम तो बहुत थोड़ा डालते हैं. इससे फर्क नहीं पड़ता. This is the kind of state that our rural industry is in. And it's also because the owners, the people who were actually doing the job, were all laborers hired by somebody who is a rich man who doesn't care for what happens to the people who consume this product. Unfortunately, I think these are not very clear. We had gone to some handmade paper units and we found that some of the motors which were being used were in a terrible state of affairs. So these are just to give you examples, the state of our rural industries where no technical input has gone. The most recent work that we are doing is in Bengal industry in Bharatpur area. You just see the way this person is sitting. This is the way they sit because otherwise they won't be able to work for that long. Look at the kind of conditions that they are working in. This is the furnace which is radiating from all over. You see this person sitting without a shirt because it's so hot there that he cannot really do anything else. So it's not just the furnace which is inefficient and polluting, but the quality of life of the workers is so bad that the moment you see it, you feel that we must do something about it. So these were a few things that we got exposed to, and over the years, so I think there are many success stories that Sitara has, much more than IIT Delhi. But I will only be able to tell you about whatever we have been involved in. So IIT Delhi was actually involved in revamping of an institute which was set up at the time of Mahatma Gandhi. It was called Jamna Lal Bajaj Central Research Institute in Vadha, which was essentially meant to provide technical inputs to village industries. But and it was under KVI. But with time the institute became defunct And about 10 years back, KVIC gave this project to IIT Delhi to revamp the institute completely, which was done under the name of Mahatma Gandhi National Institute for Low Industrialization. So while that process was being done, that project was there for about 7 years in IIT Delhi. About 30-35 faculty members from various departments of IIT Delhi were involved in that. So we did several things, a few of which I will share with you. Similarly, the most recent initiatives that we have are, one is the LUTOG, which was initiated by the Principal Secretary to Principal Scientific Advisor to the PM, and several projects have been executed under LUTOG at IIT Delhi. So I'll straight away come to some of the technologies. So this is one project which was undertaken in Bastar area under the KVIC project for revamping of VBCR. So before I actually start with this, I want to tell you the basic approach that we have followed in almost all the interventions that we have tried to make. We have never tried to tinker things without understanding the basics. So now I am using the word basics in a completely different context. So while in the first part of my talk, by the word basics I meant going back to the basic fundamental questions which affect you and I, our lives. Now when I am talking about basics, while we still have to ask those questions, we always have to ask those questions. At the same time, when we are talking about technology, we should never forget the fundamentals that we learn in our first year. Particularly, I am a thermal engineer, so I know, and I must always know how to apply my first law, my mass balance, my basic heat transfer. That in this context, why I am saying this, to make you appreciate it, I want to tell you one experience. I won't name the industry. There was one industry which took over another bread making industry. One business house bought over one bread making unit in Delhi, and they wanted IIT to help. I had just joined IIT at that time, I was very new, and there was a senior professor who asked me whether I would like to, because he was approached for that, and he asked me whether I would like to join, and I readily agreed. So we were told that they were using a boiler for baking bread. Basically they were generating steam using that boiler, and that boiler was generating steam which was used for baking the bread. So they essentially wanted us to check whether one of their boilers could be done away with, or maybe the energy consumption in the boiler could be reduced or something of that kind. So essentially we were supposed to do the energy audit. So we decided that they gave us the problem in very vague terms. They wanted to reduce the cost of energy. So we decided we will do the energy audit of the entire bread making process. So we made some measurements, we asked them some questions. So the first thing that we did was do the basic mass balance for water, which was being made into steam, and basic energy balance of the fuel, etc. Whatever enthalpy was in the steam, and so on and so forth. So we went to the absolutely basic question, which normally one doesn't bother about. Mass balance is always there. First, energy will always be conserved. Why do we have to really worry about it? So we normally take first law for granted. The moment we did these basic calculations, we found that the energy, the steam which was actually required in the furnace, the bakery oven, where they were baking the bread, that oven was actually using only a small fraction of, not even 1% of the steam that they were generating. And I did my calculations, I checked it again and again, and I was wondering what's going on. I told Professor Kale that I think there is some problem. I'm finding it very funny. How can this be that 99% of water and almost 99% of energy I am not able to account for? So he also sat down to thinking, and he is a very experienced person. So he said, okay, let's go to their plant next time again. Let's see. Let's ask them to open their water tap after the boiler. So okay. We went there and we made measurement of how much water was going through the water tap. 99% of the hot water is actually going through the door. Only 1% of whatever steam was being generated was actually reaching the top. So our calculations were not wrong. So it was actually absolutely shocking. And these managers were actually IIT graduates. Of course, graduates of 60s and 70s. But one could not believe that in an industry which is supposed to be reputed, this could be the state of affairs. And if this is the state of affairs in a big industry, you can imagine what will be the state in a rural industry. So I want to give you this example. This is an example of a pottery furnace on which quite a few of us work. I was actually I joined in only later. Two of my senior colleagues were putting more time there. So there was a pottery furnace in Bastar area for which they did the complete energy audit to whatever extent was possible. Measurements were made, and they found that a lot of energy was going in the wall and on the floor. Then some calculations were done, some students were put on the job, and one of the students came up with a very nice solution. He said, why do we want to use a solid wall? Why don't we use a rat trap bond? Because we don't really need too much strength in the wall of the pottery furnace. And anyway they were putting belts, so we can put belts. So when this rat trap bond was used, you can see the rat trap bond being built here. The walls, the thermal inertia of the walls came down. Similarly, on the floor, we decided, because we didn't want very expensive solutions, we made a grate made up of bricks only, so that the fuel is not burned directly on the floor. The result was overall reduction in the capital cost and almost 50% saving in fuel. In fact, we also did not expect it. We did some basic calculations before we implemented it for energy absorption in the wall, the thermal conductivity, etc. But we also did not expect that the performance would be so good. The organization with whom we were working were so happy with this solution that then they decided to conduct more workshops for entire region close to their organization, and several furnaces were installed along these lines. So this was one of the success stories that really encouraged us a lot. Similarly, while we were working in the Bastar area, we happened to see those primitive furnaces which were very polluting and very inefficient, less than 1% efficiency. So we put some students on the work, took them a couple of years, and we came up with an integrated unit in which one could melt the metal as well as preheat the mold. Overall, in fact, they were using wood and they wanted to switch to gas, which was more easily available there. So after the entire thing was done, so we also did some CAD modeling, etc., did some CFD analysis, and finally we found, you can see some CFD analysis here. Finally we found that when they used LPG in lieu of firewood, the overall cost of operation actually came down. We called the artisans to come and first used the furnace in IIT, and after they suggested modifications, we took it back, and they were very happy with it at some stage. But some local politics, and they are refusing to use it. So we are still not able to understand what will make them use it. Every time we go, they use it and say they are very happy with it. Why don't you use it? There is no answer. So these are the questions we are still grappling with. Similarly, we have been working on improved cook stoves. I think there are a large number of people in the country who have been working with cook stoves. I want to give you just one example here of using tools which are high-end tools for these so-called low-end technologies. There is an organization called RT in Pune. You might be aware of that. So once they told us, when we were interacting with them, that their Bhagyalakshmi stove was cracking at the bridge again and again. So then we decided to do an analysis. This was a student project, and we found that whatever you may do, the stresses at the bridge will always be high. And hence we suggested to them that why don't you make the bridge in modular form so that you get an expansion joint there. So this was again something, and another thing which we did was, they were making the stove in a solid way. This whole thing was solid. We found that if we remove much of the material from the base, the strength does not get affected and overall energy consumption gets reduced. So these were simple tools that we used for. This is one work which a PhD student has finished recently. This is a downdraft gasifier stove. This is actually the smallest downdraft gasifier that we are aware of in the kitchen. It consumes less than 1 kg per hour of wood. We have also run it on pellets made of agricultural residue. So in this stove, we actually used some of the very basic techniques for designing. We went to the fundamentals, we did the basic design, and only then we did the final fabrication. And it was nice for us to see that the final stove performed very close to the expected performance. Similarly, I think I'll have to stop here now. We talked for a long time. So the basic idea that I want to generate here is that generally the kinds of technologies that we have been successful with so far, at least partly at the field level and partly at the lab level only, because not every technology that we have worked with has reached the field so far, but it has always been much more satisfying to start from the fundamentals. Make sure that you apply your basic laws very clearly, you understand the basics of our technology, and then it's possible for us to refine the technology in such a manner that it is useful to the user. And another thing, that all said and done, it is best to work with the user for development of any technology. There is, I think, no compromise on that. Even if now we have a stove which we are happy with, but this stove has to be engineered, re-engineered in consultation with the people who are going to use it. Only then it can turn into a reasonable product. Otherwise, again, so when we talked about the bell metal furnace, all through we were in touch with the user. And this time we know that it is not a technical reason because of which they are not using it, it is something different. But despite that, we are facing hurdles. So if we have not consulted the user while developing the technology, there is no way that we can really expect or hope that the technology to be adopted by this. So I think I will stop here. There are a couple of more technologies which have been developed and we will talk.